Hey everybody, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Beekeeping for Newbies. Thank you very, very much for taking the time to listen. I do appreciate you. And as always, feel free to join us over in the Discord room, linked from the Beekeeping for Newbies, NEWBEES.com homepage. And you can always chat with us over there. And check in, let us know what's going on with you. And I cannot seem to get this frog out of my throat here. I don't know what's going on this morning. It's a little early. I usually record about 3 or 4 hours later, but I've got a commitment for a couple of days coming up. I'm going to be tied up, and I'm actually going to be on the road a little bit. I was thinking maybe like throw a microphone on and just try to capture a bunch of notes on things. So I might do that. We'll see how that works out driving down the road. But I hope all the dads out there had a wonderful Father's Day yesterday. Y'all had a good time. Get out there on the grill. Of course, there was a lot of rain, so prayers out there to the folks in West Virginia. I think I heard something about between 2 and 4 inches of rain in a 30-minute period. So I hope everybody's staying safe and recovering out there. And then, of course, all of those. Leads us into today's warm-up song. This is in honor of Global Activity War Pigs by Black Sabbath. Just a special thank you to all those who like to send other people's kids off to war. Special thanks to all of our monthly supporters and all the folks in the Buy Me a Coffee. Sherry, thank you for yesterday's contribution as well. And all the folks who keep the train rolling down the track. Thank you very much. And remember, for just pennies a day, you too can keep a former IT guy from having to go back. Today is just going to be a couple of just notes. It's not really a bee buzz where we roll through and do a bunch of Q&A. It's really just a couple of topics I wanted to combine really quickly because they're important things I want to get out there right away. And I want to make sure that you have this information. It's kind of important, but it's just a couple of quick topics that I wanted to talk about and just give you something to think about. So the 3 things that we're going to talk about today is going to be some used gear. Not a whole lot. I'm not going to go into a lot of depth. We did cover it in a previous episode, but I do want to give you a couple of cautionary notes on used gear. And then I'm going to talk about swarm trapping, kind of, what to do after the catch. This is something that came up in a question in the Discord room. So we'll talk about that. And then last on the list is just talking about a combination of things, one of them being what you should expect when you're buying bees. Like when you go somewhere, whether you find them on Facebook or it's a apiary, you find their Facebook page, web page, Google search, whatever it might be, the things that you should expect to see when you go and pick up bees are the things that you kind of need to be asking for. Now, I feel like these things can, and probably have in some previous episodes we did a while back, can definitely make their own episode. But I just want to kind of do a quick lightning round here before I get out on the road so that I don't miss the Monday episode and I can get you guys some quick things that you can take action on here right away. Okay, now I'm going to reference a couple things here that you can go back to previous episodes on to get some additional information. One of them is episode 134, The Real Cost of Beekeeping. We are going to be talking about some things dealing with expenses today. And episode 153, The Dearth is Coming, or this is also kind of like the Game of Thrones here, right? Winter is coming. Same thing, right? Same thing. Okay, so the first thing on the list here I want to talk about, we covered it yesterday or last week with the walkaway split, and we went into a lot of detail around, why I don't think it's a great splitting approach and why I don't do it. We talked about timing, but I want to go into this a little bit more again. I think there are a few folks maybe who haven't heard the episode yet, but I want to reiterate this. It is important that you're doing things with bees that align naturally with when they want to do things. So as we went through that episode, we talked about, hey, the timing to do splits should generally be, if you're doing it very naturally, it should be going on at the time of year when the bees are swarming, right? So when they swarm, you do a split, same kind of thing, right? You're swarming for them synthetically by doing a split. You solve 2 problems, right? You reduce that urge to swarm, and you're getting a split done that you may have wanted to do. If you don't want to split, whole separate discussion. But the one thing I'm starting to see relatively consistently is, you have a queen cell, you should split. I believe that broadly in, 80% of the time, 90% of the time, that's not the answer. When a colony decides, hey, we need to make a swarm cell, it's time for us to swarm, it's not necessarily because it's a great time to do a split. And I'm going to say this again because I really want to harp on this. It's critically important. The presence of a queen cell alone does not justify, warrant, or mandate that you do a split. I can take a 2-frame nuke. I can stick 2 frames of brood in there and leave them alone. And in a week and a half or so, maybe 2 weeks, I'm going to have queen cells. It doesn't mean I need to split my 2-frame nuke. It means they are out of space in the brood chamber. They recognize that there's more forage and more resources coming in than there is space to store it, but more importantly, space to raise brood. And therefore, they decide it's time to split, thereby swarming. In the spring, you see a queen cell, you can just go with the flow. You're like, oh, I've got a couple of double deeps here, queen cell. Hey, why not? Let's do a split and, we'll make another colony. No problem. But when we talk about that timing, like for me, I can tell you hands down right now, there's a 0% chance I'm doing a split on June 16th. Not happening. If I don't have my splits done by May 10th, 12th, maybe the 15th, it's just not going to happen that year. It's critical to understand the nectar flow in your area. And it's really easy to turn on, YouTube and be like, oh, John Smith over here in Kentucky, he's doing all his splits this weekend and it's June for him. It must be working. I can do that too. No, because John Smith doesn't tell you how many hundreds of dollars he's going to spend dumping 25-pound bags of sugar into the sugar feeders to keep the bees fed. I mean, I can tell you that when I did the 5-gallon feeders, 25-pound bag of sugar goes in there and they can go through a bag every day. You get, 8 or 10 colonies, you're going to go through that 25-pound bag every day. They will just slurp that syrup up as quick as you put it out there. But let's just be nice and say that you're not going to feed them every day. Maybe you only refill it 5 days a week. So, 20 days out of the month, you're dropping at least, if you catch a bulk volume discount, maybe you're lucky enough to get them for $10 a piece, but it's probably more like $12 or $15 a bag. You're dropping $225, $250 a month in sugar. That doesn't count pollen sub. That doesn't count pollen patties or anything else. So you got to understand you can split whenever you want. But if you do it at a time of year when you're going into a dearth, at a time of year when there is no nectar flow, and you did it just because you saw the queen cell, you might be setting yourself up for failure. So I'm going to tell you something that I haven't told you before. Just because you see a queen cell does not mean you should split your hive. Please don't do it just because of that. Please, please, please. Give them more space. Drop a foundation frame or drawn comb in the middle of your brood box. Add, honey supers on top. Move things around a little bit if that's what you have to do. But please don't just split because there's a queen cell. All right, the next thing today is swarm traps. And the question I have a lot, and I've seen it quite a bit, both by email and in the Discord room, is I've got a swarm that I caught in my swarm trap. What do I do now? What I would say here is a colony of bees is very much like a person. It is a living organism. Like people have, millions, billions, whatever of cells in their body that make up you, the person. The colony has all these bees that are like individual cells that make up the colony. And the culmination of all of these smaller things make the bigger thing. Just like people, every bee colony is different. It's going to behave differently. It's going to have different things it likes, different things that it doesn't. It's almost like you can put a line of people people in a row, and you can have somebody say, okay, is that person attractive? Yes or no? And you're going to get different answers from different people because different people like different things. It's the same thing with your bees. And this is where it makes it really, really difficult for you, the beekeeper, because you're out there in the world going, hey, I need information. Help me. I'm trying to learn how to do this. And somebody says, oh, no problem. Well, what I do every year up here in Libby, Montana, I do XYZ at this time of year every year. And that works for them every year. And that's perfectly fine. But if you're down, if you're not familiar with Libby, Montana, I think it's like 10, 20 miles from the Canadian border in northwest Montana, beautiful area. If you live in the desert Southwest in the U.S., you're down in Arizona, New Mexico, something like that, the things that you do in Libby, Montana probably aren't going to work out too well as far as timing goes when you're in the desert Southwest or when you're in the Southeast or maybe even the Northeast. Some of these things, many of these things are very regionally specific. And even within a region, you can have lots of differences and variances to the forage and the behavior and the genetics. And there's so many variables involved that it makes it really difficult. We as educators are trying to kind of hit a moving target. You as the beekeeper are trying to juggle the information and figure out what will work and what won't work. So what I would tell you kind of broadly, and this is not just for swarm related issues, but broadly, whenever you see somebody doing something and they say, hey, this is what I do on my YouTube channel, and here's how I like to do all my splits in July and August and all this, kind of stuff that they're doing where they are, be very mindful and cognizant that just because that's what they did there doesn't mean it's what you should do where you are. Now, I know that's kind of getting back to the splitting thing again, but it applies to swarm trapping as well. I'll tell you what I do, and then I'll tell you some things I've heard other people do, and hopefully you'll be able to find, something in the middle that sort of works for you. What I will do is I like to hang swarm traps in like mid-March, ideally, but preferably no later than 1 April. We will get some swarms out in the country. Typically, mid to late March is not unheard of. And we tend to have milder winters anyway. You get a couple of warm days in January, February, and you can catch an early, mid-March swarm. But late March, early April is a good time frame to get those out. And they usually come down by the first, second week of June. So next time I'm there, I'll go ahead and pull my swarm traps down. And you put a little bit of some swarm lure in there, whether it's Swarm Commander or lemongrass oil or whatever you like to use. You put your bait on there. And if you live there, it's kind of cool because then you're hanging out one day, you look outside and you go, oh, look at this, I got a swarm coming in. What I do is I like to just give them just a couple of days. Now, in my situation, if I catch one at my house, I take it down to my property. If I catch one at the property, I bring it to the house. That way, there's no issue with bees getting left behind. But if you're in your yard and you have a swarm trap, let's say you have an acre of land and maybe half of it's wooded and half of it's open, you put a swarm trap up against the wood line, catch a swarm, but you want the bees to be, let's say, 30 or 40 feet from the house where you keep all your other hives, you're probably going to take it down at some point and some bees are going to get left behind. That's going to happen. Some of the foragers are going to go back to the tree. There's no sense in gathering them off the tree and bringing them back because they'll say, oh, thank you so much for bringing us home. You're like, hey, no problem, man, I got you. And then they're going to leave and go out to forage, and then they're going to land back on the tree again. So it is what it is. But as soon as I see the swarm go in, I'm like, okay, cool, they're here, that's great. And then I usually give them like at least 24 to 48 hours. Once I know they're coming and going and they have now established this as their home, I like to pack them up and make the move. Now, if I'm at my house, give them a couple of days, close a little spinning wheel on the front, take them to the property, put them in a hive box, they're off and running. And like I said, vice versa, I can do that. Now, at my property, I just show up, and if they're there, they're coming home. I don't necessarily visit there every day or every week or whatever it might be. So if I'm there and they're there, they're coming home. But if they're at your house, like I said, give them, a day or two to kind of settle in. They don't need to be there for a week or two, but some people say, oh, I always give mine at least a week or two because I want them to start laying eggs and I want them to get attached to those frames because of the fact that they've now made a commitment to drawing comb and laying eggs and storing some resources. And now when I move them to the hives that are 50, 100, 200 feet away, I'm going to lose some foragers, but the nurse bees and the queen, they're all going to stay there because they've got eggs. That's a theory a lot of people operate on. I'm not going to say it's wrong. I'm not going to say that it doesn't help or contribute to the likelihood of them staying once you make the move. I just haven't had an issue. Every time that I have taken them from the tree and put them into a box, they have stayed. Some people have said that they've put them, taken them from the swarm trap, put them into the box, whatever it might be, a Langstroth, double deeps, a nuke, whatever they're using. And, the next day they will basically abscond for whatever reason. So again, I tell you, do what works for you. There's nothing wrong with leaving them there for, let's say, a week. But remember, the longer that you leave them there, they will start to build up. They will start graduating more worker bees into foragers. And of course, those foragers are now going to leave as the population is increasing. And that's more bees left behind on the tree when you do move them. Again, if you're moving them in the yard. And the other thing you don't want to have happen, or maybe you do, but if you allow them to just stay there for 3, 4, 5 weeks, they're going to draw up all the comb. And then as you might remember, the swarm trap boxes are deeper because they kind of look for that deeper cavity if they can find it when the scout bees are out searching for a new home. So you have that extra space and cavity, they'll just start drawing comb right down the bottom of the frames. So you basically have like a bee barn where you get these like double-sized frames almost because they're going to build down. It's not the end of the world, but you can definitely get into a situation where you now have a swarm trap loaded up with bees that is actually going to swarm itself and is going to start making swarm cells. So if you leave them there too long, you do run the risk that they may decide that they need to swarm, and you're going to be dealing with some comb. Now, it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world. You may have some of that comb dangling off the bottom of those frames. Take a fillet knife, slice off some eggs, put that into a mating nuke with a couple frames of brood, and let those nurse bees all emerge and start caring for these eggs, making queen cells. You got a miniature little queen factory there that you put together with very minimal effort on your part. So there's reasons why having some of those things are cool. But again, as a new basic beekeeper, just trying to keep things simple, put them in there no more than a week, right? Just target something in that 3 to 7 days range and you should be fine. Oh, another tip too. There are some folks I know that have said when they catch a swarm and they know the swarm is in there, they'll go ahead and grab a frame of either open or closed brood, and they'll open the swarm trap, drop that frame right in the middle, and that kind of instantly makes the bees want to say, oh, this is our home. The nurse bees see all that brood and they're like, cool, this is my job. This is what I'm supposed to be taking care of. And they all kind of get attached to it right away. I've never done that. If you have those spare resources and maybe you've got another colony you're trying to prevent from swarming, it wouldn't necessarily be the worst idea to reduce some of the pressure in that hive by moving, a frame of brood over to the swarm trap. So not something I do, but definitely something that sounds like it makes sense. Okay, in the last area, I'm going to break this into two areas. One of them is going to be buying used equipment. So I'm just making sure I'm updating this appropriately here. So we're going to talk buying used equipment. And then the last thing we're going to talk about will also be what to kind of ask and expect when you're buying bees, whether you're picking up packages or nukes or whatever. Buying used equipment. This is one of my favorite sayings, like everything is fine until it isn't. You can buy all the used equipment all day long, and you're probably never going to have a problem. You can go to Facebook and somebody's like, hey, I've been beekeeping for a couple of years, got out of it. I've got like 5 hives worth of stuff, give me $500 and you can have everything, right? And you're like, cool, what a good deal. It's like half price. And like I said, probably 98, 99% of the time, it's never going to be an issue. It's that 1%. Like somebody's got to be the 1% where they get that hive that's got all kinds of American foul brood spores all inside the hardware. You come home to your 5-6, colony apiary, and you're all pumped up and excited, and you're starting to put some, new bees in there. And then next thing you know, you lose your entire apiary because you had American foul brood spores in this used gear that you bought, and it becomes very devastating. That really is the biggest risk, is disease. Like you can bring all your frames if you want, put them in the freezer and freeze them and kill off, hive beetle eggs and wax moth eggs and things like that. You can handle most things by throwing them in the freezer for a few days. You can't beat foul brood. And like I said, those spores, I've heard anything between 40 and 70 years that those spores can live inside that hardware. So that's the big risk. Now, maybe it's your first time beekeeping, you have nothing. And you're like, you know what, I'm going to buy $1,000 worth of all this used gear and we'll just see what happens. You can roll the dice with that. And, you may say, hey, I've only got 3 or 4 hives, or even better, maybe you have an out apiary, like you have your primary home where you keep all your bees, and you have another yard somewhere else. Maybe you bought a piece of land as an investment, or you have a friend who has 5 or 6 acres, and you're like, hey, do you mind if I put a couple beehives in the very back? It allows you to put them out there, maybe catch a swarm, put the swarm in there, and then you can just observe, for a few weeks and make sure that everything is healthy and everything is fine before you bring that into your apiary. But when it comes to foul brood, it's not just something that's going to impact the hardware, the hive components. This is like stuff that gets on your gear. Like if someone said to you, like, hey, I think I might have foul brood. Can you come help me out and take a look and make sure that I've got this right? You don't want to take your regular bee suit, your regular hive tool, your regular things, anything that you have that contacts, or, like your gloves, your suit, everything. You don't want to take that into that funky, gross hive, because now you can get those spores on your gloves, on your suit, on your hive tool, and then you walk into your apiary and you pass that stuff right along. So you definitely want to use extreme caution anytime you're dealing with used gear or suspected illness, within someone else's apiary or anybody you might be mentoring or helping out with. Like I said, I'm pretty sure we did a full episode on this. If this is something that you listen to it and you're like, man, I really need more information here. This is good, but I don't think I got all of it, kind of figured out. Drop us a note, bring it up in the Discord for further discussion, and we can do a dedicated episode. Like I said, I'm pretty sure we did one a couple years ago, but we can always revisit that. Okay, the last thing I'm going to talk about today is what to ask when buying and picking up bees. Now, just because somebody is not registered with your state, many states that are selling honeybees require registration. You're going to have to register with the state Department of Agriculture. You're going to have maybe an annual inspection. You may be required to provide some kind of an inspection certificate to people who buy bees from you. Different states have different requirements. As a seller, if you are the seller, I encourage you to follow these processes. One, you want to keep yourself out of trouble, but two, you want to have a trail that actually helps you, like a documentation trail that helps you and supports you. Because if somebody says, well, I bought this from Joe's Bees, and you're like, whoa, hold on, here's all my documentation, man, my stuff is in order, then you can defend somebody who makes an accusation against you. And, most people in the bee community are pretty good. They're mostly pretty good about saying, hey, not sure what happened, but this was my experience. The people were really nice. I don't think it was on purpose. They're generally supportive and not really aggressive towards one another. But I've also heard people really just kind of flip out on their suppliers. And it's mostly ignorance. It's just that they don't really know, and they don't, it's a good community overall. But cover yourself, cover your backside, and make sure that nobody has a reason to point at you for being the cause of a problem. They put these rules in place to prevent the spread of illness, to prevent the spread of disease, and it's just a good practice. So if that's a requirement, please do that. But just because somebody doesn't, there are some people that are just remote, small-time beekeepers. They don't want the government in their business. They're like, no, I'm not going to report to the government every time I make a split. It's just not going to happen. I get it. I can understand why you might feel that way, but be very professional, provide documentation. So you might be a non-registered beekeeper at a, sideliner, small commercial kind of capacity. Someone shows up there to buy, a hive from you. What you should be providing to everybody who buys a colony from you, whether it's a nuke or a full size, 10 frame colony, 4 frame nuke, whatever they might be buying from you. In my opinion, you should be providing them information on the queen. When was that queen mated? How old is she? One of people's favorite things to do is talk about, air quotes, overwintered nukes. Okay, well, the only thing that overwinters, the queen is really the core of this. Yes, all of the bees that are with her from anywhere between, let's just say October to February, yes, those are all overwintered bees. And every one of them is dead by like March. They all are going to die. As soon as they start getting active, coming out of the winter, hibernation, they're going to die. The only thing that matters is, can the queen overwinter? But what some of these people will do is take bees that overwintered with a queen, and then they'll breed a new queen in the spring, and then stick the newly bred queen in a group of bees that just, air quotes, overwintered. And they're like, hey, look, overwintered nuke. Now, I don't think that this is a broad problem, but I know for a fact that it happens. So my recommendation, if you're buying an, air quotes, overwintered nuke, make sure you say, hey, I see this is an overwintered nuke. I'm assuming you guys mean that this queen has overwintered. And they're going to be like, yes, she has. I want to know what her, birthday is, or her emergence date. How old is the queen that I'm getting? And that applies to if you got her, let's say in May, you get a nuke in May. I want to know, okay, is this a queen that is, an April queen? Because you need to keep track. You need to know how old your queens are. So you want to know how old the queen is. You want to know what they've done for Varroa treatments. When was the last time a treatment was done? What are the history of the mite counts? One way they're going to try to get around this with you is they're going to go, oh, well, this nuke we made was from, we shook bees out of, 15 different colonies, and we made our nukes from that. So these frames, the frames here that you have on this 5-frame nuke, they literally came from 5 different hives. We got bees from 8 different hives. Okay, cool. Well, what's your treatment routine? What is your regimen that you use for treating Varroa across these 8 hives that you used to create my nuke. They should be able to tell you, oh yeah, we do all of our mite counts. All of them that contributed to this had less than 5 mites per 100 or less than 3 or 0 or 1 or whatever. They've got to be able to provide you with something. They should be able to tell you, I don't know why they wouldn't, is you say to them, I would say, hey, what did you treat them with? Oh, well, we used this in the fall and we just treated them with this in the spring. Okay, cool. And you're having pretty good effectiveness with this. I want to know what they're having effectiveness with in treating these bees, because I might be using something else, which might be a good thing, right? You're going to mix up your treatments and try things that are different so they don't develop resistance. So the fact that I'm going to use something different is not a bad thing at all. But I also know they have something that's working. So that might be my second treatment. Because remember, I always tell everybody, try to have 2 treatment options in your toolbox. And you may want to rotate a little bit depending on your mite counts and what the effectiveness is of the treatment plan that you're using. But they should absolutely provide you with some information about when they were last treated, what they're using. If they are if they are in fact registered with the state, they should be able to provide you with like an inspection certificate or something indicating, when their last inspection was or something like that. Another thing while we're on that subject is, and this gets a little tricky. If I were going to make a bunch of nukes, more likely than not, what I'm doing is I have a mating yard with my mating nukes. My queens are all in there. They're ready to go. I'm probably going to go in, let's just put it into like a standard week. I'm going to go in probably on Friday, and I'm going to go ahead and take, let's say I'm selling 10 nukes Saturday morning. I'm going to go into my mating yard, get my queen cages, grab a couple of attendants, get my queens in the cages, bring them into an incubator, go ahead and put them in the incubator. And then I go into the bee yard and I start doing all my splits into the nukes. So I'm going to make my 10 queenless nukes, go ahead and get them, set up wherever they need to be. And then I will either go ahead and introduce the queens that are already mated, that I literally just a couple hours ago put them into queen cells. And there's 15 different ways you could do this, right? You could literally walk over to the mating nuke, grab the queen, walk over to the new nuke, put her inside. She's a laying queen going into a queenless colony. Really shouldn't be a problem. But for safety's sake, you can go ahead and take that queen, leave her in a queen cage if you want. You can do it a few days ahead of time and then let them release her. You can go ahead and just let them be queenless and then take her directly out of the mating nuke. Again, lots of different ways to get it in there. But the key point that I'm getting at is a couple days before you get there, I'm going to be installing a new queen. Ideally, I'd like to have that queen at least a few days where she can move around and start laying some eggs so we can at least just confirm 100%. But as the person who's buying, I don't want to just get there and see a bunch of frames of brood and maybe a couple honey frames and no eggs. I'd really like to see that queen is laying eggs. Now, here's where it gets kind of weird. As soon as you open that nuke, you're losing bees, right? Like they're going to say, oh, cool, I can go fly, I can go forage. But you kind of want to do an inspection and you want to see, you want to see your queen. You want to make sure she's there. You really want to see her laying if possible, but you also don't want to lose bees. And so I think there's this tendency to want to say, you know what, I'm going to take your word for it, Mr. and Mrs. Beekeeper who own these nukes that I'm buying from you. I'll take your word for it that she's there and healthy, and I'm going to hit the road. Once you drive away, you've kind of accepted whatever you've got in the box. And they're probably going to tell you, like, look, we told you that we would open them up and show you everything before you left, and you decided you didn't want to lose any bees. So I want to kind of explain to you just real briefly. Yes, it would be really ideal if you just happened to be there Friday and you could do an inspection with them and see your queen. Oh, there she is. She looks really good. That's awesome. And they close it all back up. And then you come in Saturday morning. They closed it off Friday night. You come in Saturday morning to a closed hive, pick it up, take it home, open it up at your place. You didn't lose any bees. Now, the reality of it is it's not going to make a difference. Did you lose 20, 30, 50, 200, 500? Your nukes, these new nukes that you have, they are going to burst at the seams and explode. So contrary to what somebody has advised recently in our Discord room from their mentor, nucleus colonies won't swarm. I think like 10 people in May emailed me and they're like, yeah, I had this nuke. I put it out. I had to go out of town for a couple weeks. I came back and they swarmed. like nucleus colonies will swarm. This goes back to the very beginning of what we talked about, right? If you have a 2-frame nuke, they will make queen cells when they run out of space. So if you have the ability to do an inspection of that nuke ahead of time, like when you get there, take a few minutes, go ahead and go through them and ask them the questions like, hey, did you introduce this nuke yesterday? Or did you introduce this queen yesterday? Or did you install the queen last weekend? Right? Not really a bad idea to go ahead and maybe get the queen in there the Saturday, Sunday, Monday before you pick up the nuke. And that gives you a chance to see eggs and young larvae. Yes, they could very well move a frame over that has eggs and larvae from another queen. And they're like, see, isn't this great? She's already laying. And you're like, wow, that's really cool. I mean, I don't think that's shady. I think it's shady if you say that, but it's not unusual to see that. Like if I am the beekeeper selling you that, I'm going to say, yeah, we moved a bunch of frames over in varying stages of development. So you're going to have some eggs and larvae. You're going to have some capped brood, some uncapped brood. You got a good variety here. And I have no reservations telling you like, oh no, we just introduced that queen 3 days ago. So she's probably barely even laying yet. Cool. No problem. But understanding the age of the queen, the varroa treatment schedule, anything that they can provide around the genetics, it's really tough now because people broadly say, oh, these are Italians. They're the Carniolans. They'll give you kind of a generic thing, but there's so much crossbreeding between, different races of bees. It's kind of almost difficult to even really get like a true bred of any race. But, another thing that's fun to do too is to say, because again, it's a pretty supportive community, just say, hey, Mr. Commercial Beekeeper, I'm really new to beekeeping. I have this list that a buddy of mine at this podcast told me I should be asking about varroa treatments and queen age and all this kind of stuff. But if you were going somewhere to buy this nuke, like what questions would you ask? Like what things do you think are important that I should probably know before I leave here? And hopefully they're going to take a few minutes and kind of walk you through that. And that's another thing you can ask them too. Like if they say, hey, we'd like you to pick up Saturday morning, say, hey, is it possible at all that I could be like one of the first people and come a little bit early, or maybe one of the last people and just kind of pick your brain a little bit? I mean, you're giving them money. You're exchanging, money for goods and services here, having an opportunity to maybe talk to them for 15 or 20 minutes extra. If they don't want to talk to you, they don't want to talk to you, right? You can't make them. But if you have a few extra minutes, if they're willing to give you a few extra minutes, it'd be kind of cool to say like, hey, I'm really kind of brand new. Like, what is this thing over here? And like, what is that? Hey, what do you think about this? And hey, I was going to put them, I was going to have them ride shotgun next to me. Like, is that a bad idea? Good idea? Oh, on that note, we do have a list. It's a little shopping list inside of our Discord room. It's got links to some bags. It's like a mesh bag. And someone else also made a suggestion about like a Walmart branded like laundry bag. Not a bad idea if you're carrying bees, inside your vehicle, throw them in one of those bags just to kind of reduce the possibility of the bees harassing you while you're driving. But if you want to be really super cool, you can do like many of our friends and family over there in the Discord room have done. You can just drive around with your bee suit on, because let's face it, everybody loves to see somebody, driving around in a bee suit. It looks cool. I think like if you get pulled over, like what cop is going to mess with you? And you're like, yeah, it's no problem. I've got my license right over here behind this beehive. Let me just move them out of the way. So I think it's always a fun thing. Well, I tell you, I thought this was going to be like a 10 or 15 minute discussion that I was just going to just lightning around with everybody before I get on the road today. And it turns out we actually ended up pulling off a full episode. So I'll probably get back with you later this week. I'm definitely tied up the next couple of days. I got a little thing going on, but nothing exciting. You won't care about it, so you're not going to miss anything. But I think that ought to do it for today. I hope everybody has a great week. Stay safe out there. Be kind to one another. Remember that I love you. There's nothing you can do about it. We'll talk to you soon.